All right, welcome back, everybody. So guns, King Knights, Kanye West, a lot has been happening inside and outside of the Sean Combs federal courthouse as he's facing charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Been quite the day. Want to bring on Law&Crime's in-court reporter, Elizabeth Millner, to answer all of your questions right now, and there are a lot. Elizabeth, it's good to see you. As you can imagine, a lot of questions about Kanye West. He showed up to that courtroom today. We know he is a friend of Sean Diddy Combs. He was even asked reportedly outside of court, is he there to support him? Yes. So let me begin with the first question we have from Danny. There might be a misconception here. So Elizabeth, set the record straight. Was Kanye in the courtroom or was he in the overflow room?
So it was kind of an interesting morning. A lot of rumblings just about whether or not Kanye West was here, whether he was actually here, because there was rumors yesterday that he was here too. But yes, I can confirm that he was here at the courthouse today. Now, as far as being inside the main courtroom, no, he was not inside the main courtroom. I did not see him in there. But at first I was thinking, okay, maybe he might come into the main courtroom because they cleared the floor. They being the marshals cleared the floor. So I thought maybe it was to bring him into the room, but that didn't happen. But I did hear that he was sent to the overflow room, and maybe that wasn't where he wanted to be today. And so what ended up happening was I think he was there for maybe 15, 20 minutes and then ended up leaving. So no, he was not in the main courtroom, but I did hear he was in the overflow room for just a little bit.
Yeah, so we got this question from Olivia E., any jury or court reaction to Kanye being there. So I'm glad you set the record straight because it wasn't entirely clear what was going on. Oh, we had this happen today, too. Shopgirl asks, it was reported that Diddy was shaking his head again in court, during cross-examination. Did the judge admonish him once again, and did you observe any of that?
Well, I did, yes. I did observe him kind of nodding along with Mark Agnifilo, even towards the end of Mark Agnifilo's cross to the HSI investigator, or HSI agent, special agent, I should say, that I saw Diddy kind of give him an under-the-table thumbs up that I was able to see from my angle and my point of view. But afterwards, Maureen Comey kind of stands up. This is after the jury is dismissed for a break, and she said that her colleagues in the back of the courtroom, who have a better view of Diddy because the prosecution sits in front of him, so they don't get a view of him, obviously because they're in front of him, but that the colleague had told Maureen Comey that Diddy was kind of nodding along with the cross-examination, and the judge was kind of like, he didn't admonish him necessarily. He was like, it's normal reaction for humans to kind of have this reaction, and I can't police every single reaction that the defendant is necessarily having. So it wasn't a stern talking to like it was the first time, but he said that if anything does happen again, he'll do the appropriate measures. But as far as Brian Steele kind of defending the defendant there, Brian Steele was kind of like, he's been nothing but professional. I'm sitting here right beside him every single day, and he's not doing what he was doing before as far as turning to the jury, nodding at them. He tries to make sure he's abiding by the judge's rules, not even looking at the jury when they enter and exit the courtroom today. And so it wasn't a tough talking to this time around, but I'm sure if something else were to happen and the judge notices something, that it might be a different type of talking to after that.
And if you just want to add to that, this is from Mary Baracco. How was Diddy today? How does he appear? How does his demeanor like?
Yeah, well, Diddy today, he was wearing his brown sweater, white undershirt, and khaki pants. As far as his demeanor goes today, I think maybe he was also possibly anticipating that Kanye West would be in the main courtroom, kind of show that level of support between friends. But he seemed kind of as usual, just, taking notes over at the defense table, speaking with his attorneys, nothing out of the normal as far as what we saw today in court. Definitely still participating in his own defense, taking all the testimony in, and then jotting appropriate notes down at the appropriate times too.
You got to explain to me what's going on with these audio tapes. I'm not sure I quite follow them, Elizabeth. We have these tapes of what appear to be Christina Coram speaking with Jonathan Perez. What do these tapes sound like? And by the way, isn't this the first time that we've actually heard the voice of Christina Coram? What is going on in these tapes?
Yeah, I think to me that was kind of the most surprising thing, not only because she had recorded this conversation, but also because I'm like, wow, we've only seen her in photographs. Now we're hearing her actual voice. But Jesse, I do want to take a step back as far as why we were hearing that particular audio recording. And it had to do with Jane, because apparently staffers over at Diddy's home saw that there was this sexually explicit video on an iPad that normally the staff uses. And so there was kind of conversations had amongst the staff about how this was found, what do we do, that that type of thing. So when Jonathan Perez was on the stand today, he was explaining that that he didn't know that this conversation was recorded, but before even this recording happened, that he had spoken to Diddy about it personally. And now when Jonathan Perez is on the witness stand, he refers to Diddy as Mr. Combs or Mr. C. So he said that he spoke to Mr. C about this recording and then spoke to Christina Coram about this particular video recording. I should kind of specify. I know there's the audio recording of Christina Coram, but as far as the Jane recording of her with another man, Jonathan Perez said he spoke to both Mr. Combs and Christina Coram about it. So then the conversation is brought back up again weeks after this initial conversation was had. And so we did hear this audio recording from KK and Jonathan Perez. It was dated January 30th of 2023. And I tried to write down as much as I could because finally and thankfully we're able to see the exhibits. So we finally were able to see the transcript. So I was trying to write down as much as I could. But Christina Coram is kind of like, I don't know how to bring this up. Bring that Bosu ball over here and sit on it so that you aren't standing. It was brought to my attention last night. And tell me step by step what happened. An outside person brought it up. Did you talk to anybody about this particular recording of Jane? Now, she didn't say, Jane or anything like that, but did you talk to anybody? So then Jonathan was like, well, I didn't talk to anybody. Christina Coram is like, well, were you in the house? And then Christina Coram said, where were you in the house? Jonathan said, Brandon was there. He was talking about something on the iPad. Christina Coram is like, okay, well, who was all in the house? We can check the cameras in the house. Jonathan is saying, well, I was just trying to saving him as far as Diddy specifically, so that way he could delete it. And then Jonathan said he didn't talk to anybody else about it. He said that Brendan wanted to tell Rob about this, said the advice was to initially just delete this video. But then Jonathan said he didn't want to delete this video in case something were to happen and it be brought back up, that type of thing. And so Diddy initially wanted to launch an investigation. Now, we didn't hear Diddy's voice on this audio recording, nor do we think that he was kind of even around when this recording took place. So really, we were just hearing the voices of Christina Coram and Jonathan Perez in this particular tape. But Christina conveyed to Jonathan that Diddy wanted to launch this investigation and how it got onto the staff iPad. And so Jonathan believed that this video was recorded on the iPad, but then Christina asked if other people like Brandon might have told other people about this. Jonathan said that Brandon was actually freaking out about this particular explicit video. And Christina Coram was like, well, was anybody else there? Think, the housekeepers, the chef. And Jonathan said that Chef K might have been around in the theater location when the staffers were kind of talking about this particular explicit video, but that Jonathan didn't relay to Christina Coram that that Chef K was in the theater. He said he didn't want to make it a big thing. And so there were no follow-up conversations after these particular recordings were recorded, but the conversation was then brought to another person, another staffer, that being Fahim, who is Diddy's driver, as well as kind of, I think he was the head of security, that he brought it up a couple weeks later after Christina Coram brought it up. And then Jonathan said that he had told Fahim pretty much the exact same story that he told in court, also that was reported on by Christina Coram too.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear this, and also wondering if she's not going to be called as a witness. Right now, there's no indication that she's going to be, which was a surprise to a lot of us following the case. We have a question here from Blessing Eek. Why was Diddy's son allowed to get to attend court yesterday wearing a Free Combs t-shirt? I thought that was against the court rules. Is that true from what you know? Yeah, and I saw this shirt myself, and we were all thinking, because I was sitting by another reporter, we were like, how is he allowed to be wearing this inside the courtroom when the jury is present? Now, I don't know if the jurors were able to see what the words were that were actually transcribed on this particular shirt, because it was like a black shirt with red letters that say Free Sean Combs, and then what Christian had over top of it was kind of this mesh top, and so I don't know if the jury was able to see those words. But what I did see was Marshall kind of go up to Christian Combs, look at his shirt, and I thought, okay, well, maybe she's going to tell him, take the shirt off, or you're going to have to change your shirt, change it inside out, similar to how Charlucci was when he was wearing his free puff shirts or free puff sweaters and hats. But that didn't happen, and so he was able to continue wearing this shirt, something that I thought was pretty surprising given just the amount of attention that is on this trial, but also because of what had happened weeks earlier when they had told another person who was wearing a free puff shirt to turn their sweatshirt inside out. I want to go back to yesterday. We were talking earlier about how Jane apparently hugged both the defense attorney and prosecutor in this case before she left the courtroom. We got a question from Danny. Did Jane stare down Diddy when she got off the stand when she was going out there and giving hugs?
I didn't see that from my point of view. And I think even there was like a split second because everything kind of happened so fast where I like look down, then I look up and all of a sudden I'm seeing Jane hugging Tinny Garagos and Tinny's kind of just like sitting there a little still in that matter. But I didn't see her stare down Diddy necessarily. From what I saw for most of her testimony, she avoided eye contact with him at all times. That's why it was really surprising to see her hug his defense attorney as she was getting off the witness stand.
By the way, Elizabeth, there was some controversy at the beginning of the day regarding a juror. There was talk about whether or not this juror would even remain on the jury. What did we learn a little bit more about what the confusion was with the juror, what the issue was with the juror? We had a lot of questions, I think, during this week in our chat about it. So what happened with this juror?
Yeah, well, we learned a lot more as far as why this particular juror was kind of being questioned and why the government might possibly want this particular juror off of this case. But the judge was like, well, why don't we bring this juror out? We asked him some questions so that way we can possibly get to the bottom of everything. And so we can ask about possible deceit. And then the defense was like, well, I don't think we're at this point that we need to ask any more questions because apparently they had already been asking this particular juror questions twice already inside the robing room or the judge's chambers. And so the defense was like, this is harmful. He didn't have deceitful responses on the questionnaire that he had submitted in order to even be on this particular jury. And the defense was like, I'm hesitant to raise the issue again because I think that we think that the juror might have believed that something was wrong and we don't want to kind of single out this particular juror. And so they said that they, being the defense, says we're concerned about his residency and we figured it out. And so this is kind of a measure of good faith. And the government is saying, well, this issue is an issue. And they said that multiple things can't all be true at one time. And there's inconsistencies with this juror's statement. And then the judge is kind of like, okay, well, maybe there's just an innocent explanation to all of this and that there's just no basis because the judge, after the defense was kind of like, oh, well, the prosecution just wants to dismiss another black juror. And the judge was kind of like, there is no basis that the government is being biased to try to dismiss this particular juror. And that the situation came up because the juror made a comment to the jury staff. The jury staff brought it to the judge's attention. So they say it's fair that the government would want to raise this particular issue. And so then the defense kind of had like a quick huddle to figure out how they wanted to proceed. And so the defense said that we considered calling this juror back, but they believe that it'll have that negative impact on the juror and just how they're treated amongst the other jury members too. It could impact deliberations going forward, and they feel like the juror would be singled out and there's just no reason to question him further. And then the defense said they even spoke to Diddy about this particular thing, and that Diddy is totally fine with this juror still staying on, possibly to deliberate too, because this isn't an alternate juror. This is one of the main jurors. And so then there was a point the judge asked him, okay, do you waive something? And then Diddy, in his defense chair, is like, I waive. And so Diddy is completely fine with this. Then the judge kind of revealed a little bit more, and it has to do with this particular juror and their residency. And so the judge is like, well, he said he lived in the Bronx, and then the government said, well, the most prudent thing to do is ask this juror more questions. Specifically, does your employer require residency in New York? And then the defense chimed in. They're like, well, this is harassing the juror at this point. It's gone to a far field, and this suggestion would be pretty troubling. And so the government is like, well, I don't know why the defense is so adamant that we just ask this juror another question. And so the judge said, I'll review both sides' arguments and then I'll make a decision later on. So as for now, every single juror is still there. Nobody has been dismissed. And so we did see that particular juror still in the jury box, still paying attention to all the testimony today, just as usual.
Well, Shopgirl says, yes, thanks, Jesse. That juror thing this morning really confused me, so thank you, Elizabeth, for clarifying that. By the way, one more thing about Kanye West. It was reported that, yes, he did go to an overflow room on a different floor, reportedly sat next to Christian Combs, obviously one of Sean Combs' sons, and then left shortly thereafter. How's the jury doing? How are they reacting to today's testimony so far, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think, for the most part, it's maybe, and this might have just been my interpretation, I think maybe it was kind of a slow start this morning. So, for example, there were exhibits that were entered into evidence. There was a bunch of stipulations, and they had heard testimony from Homeland Security Investigation Special Agent Andre Lamont. And then, it was kind of like maybe a slow start, but that just might be me as far as just why are we seeing these particular exhibit photos of baby oil and guns, and what does this all mean, and what does this particularly tie into? And then for the most part, even when Jonathan Perez had taken the witness stand too, I feel like they're still kind of engaged. They're still taking their notes down. They're still listening to all the testimony, but I haven't seen any kind of like overtly emotional or crazy reactions from them today. They're all just kind of sitting in, doing their part and doing their civic duty.
What did you make of the testimony of the special agent and all the weapons and drugs and baby oil and Astroglide that was found at Sean Combs' LA property? I mean, to read it and hear about the arsenal, to hear about armor-piercing rounds, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you take away from it?
Well, you know me, I took all my notes down, especially because there were just a lot of exhibits that were shown.
You took all your notes?
Saw an exhibit photo.
No way, Elizabeth. No way.
I did.
I know.
I did. Yes. And I come into a color coordinated situation now. I'm not sure if y'all can see that, but we're in a system. We're in a system. We saw exhibits of Diddy's home in LA. We saw an angle from the front of the home, from the back of the home. We saw this detailed layout of the property, of the basement that wasn't shown. We saw the layout of the first floor of the home, the security room, and the security room is pretty important, and I'll explain why in just a second. The garage, the master bedroom, the closet. We saw exhibits of the master bedroom, a white bed, messy nightstands, 2 chairs kind of in the front of the bed. We saw inside the drawers of the nightstand, which had 6 manila envelopes with the letter K on it. And I was thinking, okay, what does this K represent? But the K, I think, possibly may translate to ketamine, because we saw that the residue that was inside these particular envelopes did test positive for ketamine. There were things that were like chargers and earrings, cell phones and iPads inside them. Then we saw baggies of drugs. We saw Vaseline inside the iPad. We saw the closet that was opposite of the wall of the master bedroom. There was a safe inside that closet. We saw Diddy's passport, or at least kind of a zoomed out version of Diddy's passport. We saw money in plastic bags. And then there was this one substance that kind of looked like paprika a little bit, but then turns out it was actually MDMA. We saw the exhibit photos of a lot of different baby oil and Astroglide and lingerie that was found in the closet. And this particular special agent, Andre Lamont, he testified that there were 200 bottles of baby oil that were seized from the LA property and 900 bottles of Astroglide that were seized. But I think the big kind of takeaway about this particular witness testifying was just about what was found in the security room, and that was a lot of the guns, a lot of the weapons, all of the guns for the most part, according to the defense, were found in that particular security room. And so there was a bolt-action Ruger rifle, a Smith & Wesson rifle, a Glock. There were 3 30-round magazines, a Glock magazine, 2 locks for a pistol holder, a 5.11 bag. And essentially the special agent was like, this is a bag to hold things. More drum magazines, bullets that were found, and this firearm safe. So then when the cross-examination came, and we got a little peek of why the defense kind of really focused on this particular security room, because they were really like, you're aware that Mr. Combs has a security team, right? And the special agent said yes. And then we see that exhibit photo again of the layout of the home, where Mark Agnifilo points out this particular security room. And then Mark Agnifilo is like, well, you saw that the bedrooms where children live, correct? There were no ammunition in those bedrooms. The special agent said, correct. Was the security door open? Yes. Was the door locked beforehand? I don't know. Could you see it had a lock? Well, it had a doorknob, but I didn't look at the lock. And then Mark Agnifilo was like, well, you didn't take pictures of the state of the door when law enforcement arrived? And this special agent was like, well, I don't know. And this Mark Agnifilo asked, was the safe open before law enforcement got there? He was like, I don't know. And so really the defense was kind of focusing on just this security room and just kind of how the government was portraying as like there were just guns all around this house where children live, whereas the defense was like, okay, it was confined to this specific room. Nobody took photos before you guys entered and kind of destroyed everything. And that was kind of the most part of the cross-examination for Andre Lamont today, really kind of focusing on the guns, how how the guns came about, why they were moved from one room to another, and just implying that there were just guns everywhere as opposed to them being specifically in the security room of Diddy's LA home.
It helps with the racketeering charge. It helps with the jury digesting the idea of him as a leader of a criminal enterprise. I mean, having that much firepower is kind of interesting to talk about. Elizabeth, before I let you go, I have maybe the most important question of all. It's asked by Erica Charlotte. Elizabeth, how many notepads, notebooks have you filled so far?
I think I'm on, oh my goodness, I think I'm on at least 8, or I said 8 book, notebook 8 or 9.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going through a lot.
It's fine, because when Elizabeth writes her tell-all book about covering the Diddy trial, she's going to have all of her notes. Actually, Elizabeth's going to be so big at that point, she's going to have a ghostwriter going through all the notes, so it'll be fine. You'll just do the voiceover for the audiobook. Elizabeth, thank you so much. I know you have to come back into that courtroom. I'll see you later.
Thanks, Jesse.